Carl Jung discovered that you can see through anyone's psychological mask by paying attention to just two things. Not their words, not their carefully crafted image, not even their conscious behaviors. Jung found that two specific unconscious reveals expose the authentic person beneath their social performance. And most people give away these secrets without realizing it. Picture this moment. You're in a meeting with someone everyone respects, a colleague, a potential business partner, maybe even a friend. They seem confident, articulate, completely in control, but something feels off. You can't put your finger on it, but your instincts are telling you there's more beneath the surface. Something about their intensity doesn't match their words, or their reactions seem disproportionate to the situation. Jung spent over 50 years studying what he called the persona, the mask we wear in social situations. But he discovered that no matter how skillfully people try to hide their authentic nature behind carefully constructed identities, these two unconscious reveals always surface. And once you know what to look for, you'll never be fooled by someone's social performance again. These aren't complex psychological assessments. They're simple observations that reveal the deepest truths about human nature. And by the end of this journey, you'll not only be able to see through anyone's mask, but you'll understand your own hidden patterns in ways you never thought possible. But here's what makes Jung's discovery so unsettling. These two reveals don't just expose other people's hidden nature. They force you to confront your own unconscious patterns. Jung taught that our strongest reactions to others reveal our own unconscious patterns. What irritates us most about others often points to aspects of ourselves we haven't fully accepted. And these techniques will show you parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Most people go through life believing they can understand others through surface behaviors. They look for body language, verbal patterns, social status, or professional reputation. But Jung understood that these are all part of what I call the performance layer, the carefully constructed image we present to the world. The real person lives beneath this performance. And Jung discovered that no matter how skilled someone becomes at social masking, two specific unconscious patterns will always reveal their authentic nature. These patterns operate outside conscious control, which is why they're so reliable. Jung believed that the greatest achievement in life is psychological integration, becoming who you truly are beneath social expectations and unconscious patterns. But most psychological assessment based on surface behaviors is almost always wrong. True understanding requires looking deeper into the unconscious patterns that people can't fake. Jung called this hidden realm the shadow. Everything about ourselves we've rejected, denied, or pushed out of conscious awareness. But here's what's fascinating. Our shadow doesn't disappear. It reveals itself through our strongest reactions to other people. Think about it. When someone triggers an intense emotional response in you, whether positive or negative, that reaction is rarely about them. It's about some aspect of yourself you haven't fully integrated. Jung discovered that we project our disowned qualities onto others, then react to those projections as if they were objective reality. This projection mechanism operates automatically and unconsciously. We literally cannot see these patterns in ourselves, but we can spot them instantly in others. Jung taught that all unconscious content seeks expression through projection. We literally see our hidden aspects reflected in others. This is why understanding projection is the key to seeing through social masks. When someone consistently judges others for specific traits, they're revealing their own internal conflicts. When someone becomes unusually defensive about certain topics, they're showing you their psychological vulnerabilities. The very qualities that trigger our strongest reactions, both positive and negative, are often the ones we've banished from our own self-concept. What Jung found was that authentic character reveals itself not in what people choose to show you, but in what they can't help but criticize in others. These unconscious projections emerge whenever someone encounters traits or behaviors that mirror their own disowned aspects. Jung's first technique is what I call shadow spotting. When someone consistently judges or criticizes others for specific behaviors with unusual emotional intensity, they're not just offering objective observations. They're revealing their own rejected qualities. Jung argued that psychological wholeness requires embracing our complete nature, including what he called the shadow. How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole, he wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. This unconscious projection shows up most clearly in disproportionate emotional reactions. When someone attacks others with unusual vehemence for being fake, manipulative, or selfish, they're not just making character assessments, they're revealing aspects of themselves they've pushed into their unconscious. Jung discovered that what we react to most strongly in others is often what we've buried deepest in ourselves. He called this shadow projection, the unconscious process of seeing our disowned qualities in other people. The stronger the emotional reaction, the closer you're getting to their authentic but rejected nature. Let me show you how this works. Meet Erica, a corporate executive who prides herself on being completely authentic and transparent. In team meetings, she becomes visibly agitated whenever she encounters what she calls office politics. She'll interrupt conversations to point out when someone is obviously manipulating the situation or clearly trying to look good for the boss. Erica's colleagues have learned to brace themselves when she starts a sentence with, "I'm sorry, but I have to call this out." Her face flushes, her voice rises, and she launches into detailed explanations of how others are being fake or strategic. She often follows these outbursts by emphasizing her own commitment to radical honesty and her refusal to play games. But here's what Jung would see. Erica's intense reactions aren't about others' manipulative behavior at all. They're about her own sophisticated political instincts that she refuses to acknowledge. Deep down, Erica is exceptionally skilled at reading organizational dynamics and positioning herself advantageously. But she's rejected this aspect of herself because she believes it conflicts with her identity as someone who's above all that. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Erica's passionate criticism of others' political behavior is actually her rejecting a part of herself that could serve her well. She's unconsciously ashamed of her own strategic thinking, so she's buried it in her shadow and now projects it onto everyone around her. This is why shadow spotting works so reliably. When someone consistently criticizes specific traits in others, they're always telling you something about their own internal conflicts. The behaviors they judge most harshly are often the ones they've pushed into their unconscious mind. If you've ever caught yourself getting unusually angry at someone else's behavior, comment, "That's my shadow talking." But shadow projection isn't always negative. Jung discovered that we also project our disowned positive qualities, what he called the golden shadow. When someone consistently idealizes others for specific traits, they're often revealing rejected aspects of their own potential. The key is to watch for emotional intensity. When someone's reaction is disproportionate, whether negative or positive, you're seeing their shadow in action. This reveals not just what they've rejected about themselves, but also what they secretly long to express. Watch for phrases like, "I could never be that confident," or "I wish I had their courage," or "They're so naturally creative." These aren't just admiring observations. They're often indicators of disowned aspects of themselves that they believe they don't possess, but actually do. Jung's second technique is what I call persona cracking. The persona is our social mask, who we think we should be rather than who we actually are. In his collected works, Jung described the persona as a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, fittingly enough, a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other, to conceal the true nature of the individual. But most people spend enormous energy maintaining who they think they should be, rather than accepting who they actually are. This maintenance requires constant effort, and Jung discovered that when someone's persona is challenged or threatened, their authentic character emerges in that moment of breakdown. Here's how to spot it. Watch what happens when someone faces unexpected criticism, genuine failure, or situations where their usual strategies don't work. Do they become defensive and rigid? Do they blame others and refuse responsibility? Do they collapse into self-pity? Or do they maintain equilibrium and respond thoughtfully? Let me illustrate with David's story. David built his entire professional identity around being the problem solver, the guy who stays calm under pressure and always finds solutions. He wore expensive suits, spoke in measured tones, and cultivated an image of unflappable competence. His LinkedIn profile described him as a strategic thinker who thrives in challenging environments. For years, this persona served him well. Colleagues brought him their most difficult problems. Senior management relied on his calm assessments. David began to believe his own press, that he was naturally gifted at handling crisis situations without emotional involvement. Then came the project that changed everything. A major client engagement went sideways due to factors completely outside David's control. The client was threatening to pull their contract. David's team was panicking, and senior leadership was demanding explanations he didn't have. For the first time in his career, David's usual strategies weren't working. He couldn't solve his way out of the problem through analysis and calm authority. In a team meeting where the pressure reached its peak, David's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "This is completely unfair," he shouted, his voice breaking slightly. "I've done everything right, and now you're all acting like this is my fault. I can't control everything. Sometimes things just go wrong, and there's nothing anyone can do about it." The room went silent. David realized he was standing, his face flushed, his hands shaking slightly. For 30 seconds, his real personality, someone who actually felt things deeply, who took failures personally, who desperately wanted approval, stood exposed before his colleagues. Jung would say this moment revealed David's authentic character more than years of observing his professional performance. Under pressure, when his carefully maintained image of invulnerable competence was threatened, his true nature emerged. David wasn't naturally calm under pressure. He was someone who worked incredibly hard to appear calm because he was actually quite sensitive to criticism and failure. As Jung observed in his psychological work, the most important problems of life cannot be solved, but must be outgrown through psychological development. David's unwillingness to experience the discomfort of not having solutions forced him into a defensive persona that ultimately limited both his effectiveness and his relationships with colleagues. The most integrated people show consistency between their public image and private reality because they've accepted their full range of human responses, including vulnerability, uncertainty, and emotional reactions. But here's where this gets powerful for daily interactions. These persona breakdowns don't just happen during major crises. They occur in small moments throughout everyday conversations. When someone's interrupted while telling a story they're excited about, when they're corrected on a fact they stated confidently, when someone doesn't laugh at their joke. Watch for micro-expressions, subtle defensive shifts, or slight changes in energy. These tiny moments when the mask slips reveal more about someone's authentic character than hours of casual conversation. Look for the split second before they recover their composure. That's when you see who they really are beneath their social presentation. The brief flash of hurt before they smile and say, "No worries." The moment of irritation before they agree they were mistaken. These micro-revelations show you their actual sensitivity levels, pride structures, and emotional patterns. Jung understood that authentic character isn't what someone chooses to show you when they're prepared. It's what emerges when they're caught off guard or challenged. The most integrated people, those Jung would call individuated, show consistency between their conscious goals and unconscious patterns because they've done the work of accepting themselves completely. Now that you understand Jung's framework, let's explore why these techniques work so reliably from a psychological perspective. Jung spent his career studying what he called the process of individuation, how we can integrate our conscious and unconscious minds while maintaining psychological balance. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But before transformation can occur, we must understand the unconscious mechanisms beneath our social performances." The persona serves important functions. It helps us navigate social situations, maintain professional relationships, and protect our vulnerability. Problems arise when we become identified with our persona, when we forget it's a role we're playing and start believing it's who we actually are. Similarly, the shadow contains not just negative qualities we've rejected, but also positive potentials we've never developed. Jung understood that psychological health requires integrating both our light and dark aspects, accepting our full humanity rather than trying to present a sanitized version of ourselves. Before we go deeper, we must address the shadow side of psychological insight itself. Jung taught that unconscious psychological content inevitably manifests in our external circumstances, what he called synchronicity and projection. The ability to read people accurately can become its own form of unconscious superiority if misused. I've seen people use Jung's insights to become what I call shadow hunters. Individuals who use psychological knowledge to attack others' vulnerable spots, rather than developing their own self-awareness. This represents a complete perversion of Jung's work. Jung consistently emphasized that psychological insight should lead to self-understanding rather than judgment of others. Sometimes people become obsessed with analyzing others precisely to avoid looking at their own patterns. Warning signs of misuse. 1. Psychological superiority, using insights to feel smarter or more evolved than others. 2. Defensive projection, immediately turning analysis outward when someone criticizes you. 3. Manipulation, using understanding of someone's patterns to control or exploit them. 4. Emotional detachment, using analysis to avoid genuine connection and vulnerability. 5. Judgment without compassion, seeing others' shadows without recognizing your own. The most profound aspect of Jung's framework is what I call the mirror effect. The inevitable moment when you realize that everyone you're analyzing is reflecting aspects of your own psyche back to you. Jung taught that all unconscious content seeks expression through projection. We see our hidden aspects in others and react to them as external reality. The ultimate purpose of learning to read others is to awaken to your own unconscious patterns and begin the process of conscious integration. This mirror effect operates on multiple levels. First, the people who trigger you most are showing you your own rejected qualities. Second, the people you idealize most are reflecting your own undeveloped potentials. Third, the patterns you spot most easily in others are often the ones operating unconsciously in yourself. Let me share how this played out in my own understanding. For years, I prided myself on spotting fake people, those who seemed to be performing rather than being authentic. I became quite skilled at identifying when someone was trying too hard to impress others or maintain an image. I felt superior to these performers because I valued authenticity so highly. I saw myself as someone who was genuinely comfortable with himself and didn't need external validation. Then came the day when someone I respected pulled me aside after a social gathering. "You know," they said gently, "you spend a lot of energy making sure everyone knows how authentic you are. Have you noticed that?" The comment hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, I could see my own pattern clearly. I had developed a sophisticated persona around being the authentic one. I was performing authenticity, using my supposed comfort with myself as a way to feel superior to others. My criticism of fake people was actually projection. I was seeing my own performance anxiety reflected in their behavior. Jung observed that true insight comes from inner reflection rather than external analysis. Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens, he wrote in Letters Volume 1. I realized that my ability to spot others' masks was actually showing me my own unconscious need for approval and superiority. As you develop skill with Jung's framework, you begin to embody what he called the individuated person. Someone who sees clearly without judgment, understands deeply without manipulation, and accepts their full humanity without defensive projections. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The individuated person thinks independently rather than conforming to collective patterns, feels authentically rather than performing emotions they think they should have, and acts from genuine understanding rather than unconscious reactions." This consciousness has several distinguishing characteristics. 1. Emotional regulation without suppression. You feel your reactions fully, but don't automatically act on them. When someone triggers your shadow projections, you recognize the trigger as information about yourself rather than objective truth about them. 2. Curiosity without judgment. You become genuinely interested in understanding others' patterns without needing to fix, change, or criticize them. Their personas and shadows become fascinating aspects of the human condition rather than problems to solve. 3. Compassionate honesty. You can see others' unconscious patterns clearly while maintaining empathy for their struggles. You understand that everyone's persona developed for good reasons, and their shadow contains valuable qualities they weren't safe to express. 4. Self-awareness without self-attack. You recognize your own projections and persona identifications without harsh self-criticism. Your patterns become objects of study rather than sources of shame. 5. Authentic presence. You show up as yourself rather than who you think you should be. This doesn't mean you're inappropriate or unfiltered, but that your social presentation aligns with your authentic character rather than conflicting with it. Most importantly, you apply the same compassionate analysis to yourself. Jung emphasized that accepting oneself completely, including our shadow aspects, is both terrifying and essential for psychological health. You see your own patterns, reactions, and defenses as information rather than indictments. Here's a practical exercise for next week. Keep what I call a projection journal. When someone triggers a strong reaction in you, either positive or negative, write down exactly what behavior bothered or impressed you. Then ask yourself, what does this reaction reveal about me? What quality am I seeing in them that I've either rejected or failed to develop in myself? Don't judge yourself for what you find. Jung taught that self-acceptance forms the foundation of all psychological health and conscious development. Self-acceptance isn't self-indulgence. It's the foundation of psychological health and the beginning of conscious choice. Also, practice persona awareness on yourself. When you feel the urge to present a particular image, competent, agreeable, sophisticated, rebellious, pause and ask yourself, who am I trying to be right now? What am I afraid will happen if I don't maintain this image? Jung understood that individuation isn't about eliminating your persona or shadow, but about working with them consciously, rather than being controlled by them unconsciously. The goal isn't to become perfect, but to become conscious of your patterns so you can choose your responses rather than react automatically. Notice when you catch yourself in shadow projection. Instead of fighting the reaction, get curious about it. What aspect of yourself might you be seeing reflected in the other person? This isn't about excusing harmful behavior in others, but about using your reactions as doorways to self-understanding. As you embody Jung's insights about human psychology, something remarkable happens. Your consciousness creates ripples that affect everyone around you. Jung wrote, The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When you stop participating in unconscious projection cycles, when you don't take the bait of others' shadow material, you create space for new kinds of interaction. People sense your decreased reactivity, even if they can't articulate what's different. They might say you seem calmer, more real, or more present. What they're sensing is your increased consciousness. You're no longer feeding their projections or reinforcing their personas through unconscious reactions. This creates what I call consciousness contagion. Your awareness invites others into greater self-awareness, not through preaching or teaching, but through embodiment. When you're comfortable with your own shadow material, others feel safer exploring theirs. When you're not attached to maintaining a perfect persona, others feel permission to drop their masks. Your willingness to see others clearly without judgment creates space for them to see themselves clearly. Your acceptance of your own humanity gives others permission to accept theirs. The two things Jung identified that reveal authentic character beneath social masks, shadow projection and persona breakdown, aren't just tools for reading others. They're mirrors that reflect your own journey toward consciousness and authenticity. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you truly are, represents the highest form of human development. But you're not here to be normal. You're here to be conscious, to see clearly, and to connect authentically with the human beings around you. Every time you catch yourself projecting your shadow onto others, you have an opportunity to explore your own rejected qualities. Every time you notice someone's persona cracking, you can examine your own masks with compassion. Every time you resist the urge to use psychological knowledge as a weapon, you choose consciousness over unconsciousness. Jung understood that the journey toward individuation is the most important work any individual can do, not just for themselves, but for the collective evolution of human consciousness. Your willingness to face your own shadow creates ripples that extend far beyond your individual life. You become what Jung called a culture creator, someone who models new possibilities for authentic human relationship and psychological integration. So, watch for the projections, notice the persona breakdowns, but most importantly, turn that same clear seeing toward yourself, because the ultimate character you're developing isn't someone else's, it's your own. If you want to explore more about Jung's insights into human relationships, check out my video on Jung's 4 types of people you should never trust, where we dive deeper into his discoveries about psychological types and their shadow manifestations. Your journey toward consciousness starts with seeing clearly, and it ends with becoming who you truly are. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.